It was a Tuesday night, the kind of night that usually felt slower, quieter, almost routine. But for Maya Lopez, nothing about her life felt easy or routine anymore. She pushed open the window of her small New Jersey apartment just for a moment, letting in the faint hum of traffic mixed with the sound of a TV from a neighbour's unit. The smell of reheated takeout clung to the kitchen behind her. In the bathroom mirror, she caught sight of herself. Dark circles carved under her eyes made her look older than 27. She pulled her dark hair into a neat bun, the same way she did every evening before work, and dabbed a thin layer of concealer under her eyes. It wasn't about vanity, it was about hiding the exhaustion so customers wouldn't see the weight she carried. Her uniform hung freshly washed on the back of the door, though no matter how many times she scrubbed it, it still carried a faint mix of bleach and coffee. She sighed as she slipped it on, smoothing the apron flat against her waist. For most people, Tuesday nights were uneventful. For Maya, they were another step in the balancing act she lived every day. By morning, she would be rushing her younger brother Matteo to his doctor's appointments, picking up his insulin from the pharmacy, or sitting by his side when he wasn't feeling strong enough to get out of bed. By night, she transformed into the waitress at the Gilded Sparrow, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. As she grabbed her bag, she paused, glancing at a small photo of her and Matteo taped to the fridge, his smile wide, a little boy who deserved a better world. She whispered softly, "One day, hermano, things will be easier." Then she locked the door behind her and stepped into the night, unaware that this shift would change her life forever. The subway ride into Manhattan was crowded, as it always was. Maya sat pressed between a man scrolling on his phone and a woman holding a grocery bag that rustled with every turn of the train. She kept her eyes on the window, watching her reflection blur against the darkness of the tunnel. In that reflection, she saw someone who looked calm, but inside she was counting the minutes, wondering if Matteo remembered to check his sugar levels before bed. By the time she climbed the narrow staircase out of the subway, the city lights had already begun their evening glow. Cars honked, tourists laughed, and the smell of roasted nuts from a street cart drifted in the air. Maya tightened her coat around her uniform, keeping her head down as she made her way to the Gilded Sparrow. The restaurant was a world apart from her cramped apartment. Gold-trimmed doors, marble floors, and crystal chandeliers that seemed to float above every table. She'd worked there long enough to know the rhythm of the place, the sharp clicks of heels on the floor, the clink of wine glasses, the low hum of powerful conversations. Inside, the staff was already busy preparing for the night. Waiters polished silverware, the hostess adjusted her perfectly fitted dress, and the manager walked briskly from table to table, checking every detail as if the world depended on it. Maya slipped into her place without drawing attention, tying her apron tighter as she grabbed a tray. Her job was simple, in theory: smile, serve, clear, repeat. But in reality, it meant swallowing rude comments, pretending not to hear condescending remarks, and carrying plates that felt heavier on nights when her heart was already tired. She greeted her first table with the same polite warmth she'd perfected over the years. They barely looked at her, already lost in their own conversations. To them, she was invisible, a uniform with a tray. But to Maya, every shift mattered. Every hour brought her closer to paying Matteo's next prescription, closer to keeping their small apartment warm through the winter. And so, with her quiet strength hidden behind a tired smile, Maya moved through the dining room. She didn't know that tonight one customer would notice her, not for her service, but for something that would change everything. The night moved on the way it always did. Orders called out from the kitchen, glasses refilled before anyone had to ask, and laughter rising above the soft music from the piano in the corner. Maya's feet ached, but she kept moving, weaving between tables with practiced grace. Near the back of the dining room, at a corner table usually reserved for regulars, a man sat alone. He was older, maybe in his 60s, his silver hair catching the warm glow of the chandelier. Unlike most guests, he wasn't dressed in flashy designer clothes. His suit was simple, dark, almost understated, but the way the maitre d' hovered near him told Maya he was someone important. When she approached, he looked up slowly from the menu. His eyes were calm, steady, not dismissive like so many others. "Good evening," he said, his voice low and deliberate, as though he measured every word. Maya smiled politely, setting down a glass of water. "Good evening, sir. Would you like to hear tonight's specials?" He nodded, but as she spoke, she noticed something unusual. He wasn't just listening to the words, he was studying her, as if trying to read more than what she was saying. It made her a little uneasy, but she kept her tone steady, her smile intact. When she finished, he closed the menu and said, "I'll have the salmon, and whatever side you recommend." Maya jotted it down quickly, thanking him before heading back to the kitchen. As she walked away, she felt his gaze linger, though not in the careless way other men sometimes stared. This was different, thoughtful, curious. She brushed it off, focusing instead on balancing another tray of drinks. But something about that man stayed in the back of her mind. She didn't know it yet, but his presence at that table was the beginning of a shift, one small ripple that would grow into a wave big enough to change her life. The kitchen was buzzing when Maya slipped the order in. Pans hissed, voices overlapped, and the smell of garlic and butter hung thick in the air. She leaned against the counter for just a second, flexing her sore fingers before picking up another tray. There wasn't time to stop. When the salmon was ready, she carried it carefully through the crowded floor, weaving past clinking glasses and whispered conversations. At the corner table, the older man looked up as she set the plate before him. "Thank you," he said simply, almost too softly to hear over the noise. Maya gave a polite nod, topping off his water before stepping back. She expected him to dig in, the way most guests did, but instead he paused, knife and fork resting neatly on either side of the plate. His gaze lifted again, steady, deliberate, as though the food in front of him wasn't the main reason he was here. "Busy night?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. Customers didn't usually bother with small talk. They gave orders, they complained, they tipped, sometimes well, sometimes poorly, but rarely did they ask how she was. "It usually is," Maya answered carefully, not wanting to linger too long. She adjusted the hem of her apron, forcing a polite smile. "But it keeps me on my toes." The man chuckled faintly, then turned his attention to the meal. Maya excused herself and moved on to another table, shaking off the strange feeling his presence left behind. Through the night, she checked in occasionally. He never asked for much, just an extra napkin, another glass of water. No arrogance, no impatience, just quiet observation. When dessert menus went out across the room, she approached his table again. Before she could ask if he wanted coffee or something sweet, he placed the menu down, untouched. "That'll be all," he said. His tone was calm, final. Maya gave a short nod and went to retrieve the check, sliding it onto the polished wood of his table. She didn't notice the faint smile that touched his face as he reached for his wallet. Maya picked up the check from the printer, the thin slip of paper warm between her fingers. She slipped it into the leather folder and carried it back to the quiet corner table. By now the room had slowed, the early rush fading into the lull of late-night chatter. "Here you are, sir," she said softly, placing it down. The older man gave a small nod, his face unreadable. He reached for his wallet, sliding a card into the folder without even glancing at the total. Maya collected it, ran it quickly through the register, and brought it back with the receipt tucked neatly inside. When she returned, he was already sitting with his coat folded neatly over the back of his chair, as if waiting for something beyond the mechanics of dinner. He took the pen, signed, and then pushed the folder closed with a single motion. "Thank you for your service tonight," he said, his voice calm, steady. Maya gave a polite smile, the kind she'd practiced 100 times, and moved on to wipe down a nearby table. She didn't open the folder until a few minutes later, when she was back at the counter, balancing 2 tasks at once, and that's when her breath caught. Inside, the bill was settled in full, but the tip line showed only $1 single. Her chest tightened. For a moment she just stared, unsure if she'd read it right. The Gilded Sparrow was the kind of place where tips could pay her brother's next prescription, or cover half the rent if she was lucky. And now, after hours of careful service, of carrying plates that burned her palms and smiling through the ache in her feet, she was left with $1 single. She forced the sting down, pressing her lips together until they formed the kind of smile she wore when things broke inside, but she couldn't show it. Oh, sliding the folder into the drawer, Maya told herself what she always did. It's just money. Tomorrow I'll work again. Tomorrow might be better. But as she moved across the dining room to reset another table, she couldn't shake the strange weight of his words, or the quiet way he'd watched her before leaving. The restaurant finally emptied near midnight. Maya stacked menus back into place, folded napkins into crisp shapes, and swept crumbs from the velvet booths. The dollar still weighed on her mind, sitting like a stone in her pocket, even though she hadn't bothered to keep it. She wasn't angry. Anger felt too heavy for someone already carrying so much. But disappointment sat quietly in her chest. She thought about Matteo's insulin, the rent notice pinned by a magnet to their fridge, and how far that missing tip could have gone. As she stepped out into the chilly night, she pulled her thin jacket tighter. The streets of Manhattan still buzzed with horns and distant laughter, but for Maya it felt muted, like she was walking underwater. She moved past the glowing windows of shops she'd never afford, each one reflecting a version of her life that seemed out of reach. At the subway entrance, she paused. Her shoes ached, her shoulders slumped, and still, in her mind, the man's words echoed, "Thank you for your service tonight." It was polite, even gentle. Nothing about him had seemed careless or cruel. Why, then, had he left just $1? Maya shook the thought away and hurried down the station stairs. She couldn't afford to linger on what she didn't understand. Not tonight. Not when tomorrow promised the same cycle of rushing, working, and hoping the tips would stretch just far enough. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have guessed in that moment, was that the night wasn't finished with her yet. That single dollar was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The subway ride home was crowded, the kind of ride where strangers avoided eye contact and the stale air clung to every breath. Maya clutched the metal pole, her body swaying with the motion, her thoughts still drifting back to the single dollar folded on the table. She reminded herself it didn't matter. Some people just didn't value service. Still, the doubt lingered. By the time she reached her apartment in New Jersey, the clock was pushing 1 a.m. Matteo was already asleep on the couch, his game controller resting on his chest. Maya pulled a blanket over him and paused for a moment, her fingers brushing his hair. The weight of her double life pressed harder than ever. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Just a little longer, we'll get through this." The next day began like any other. Coffee too weak, train running late, and the rush of preparing the restaurant before the first guests arrived. But something felt different. As she walked past the polished glass doors of the Gilded Sparrow, she noticed a familiar figure waiting just outside. It was the same man from the night before. He wasn't seated at a table this time, nor dressed in the same crisp suit. Instead, he stood casually in a dark wool coat, hands tucked into his pockets, as if he'd been waiting for her. Maya froze for a second, her heart catching. Why was he here? Guests didn't wait outside for waitresses. For a moment she considered turning away, slipping inside the restaurant without a word. But then he noticed her. His eyes softened and he gave a small nod, like he'd been expecting this moment. "Maya, right?" he asked, his voice calm, steady. The way he said her name made it clear. This wasn't a coincidence. He knew exactly who she was. Her chest tightened. She had no idea how a man like him even remembered her name. Maya's first instinct was to keep walking, to pretend she hadn't heard him. Strangers rarely used her name, and when they did, it almost never meant anything good. But something in his tone, measured, respectful, made her stop. "Yes," she said carefully, her voice barely above the hum of traffic. "I'm Maya." He smiled, though it wasn't the kind of smile meant to charm or disarm. It was softer, thoughtful, as if he'd been rehearsing what to say all morning. "I wanted to apologise," he began, adjusting the collar of his coat. "About last night, I left you a tip that, well, let's just say it didn't reflect what I thought of your service." Maya blinked, stunned. Waiters and waitresses didn't get apologies, especially not from men like him, men whose tailored suits could probably pay her rent for a year. She searched his face for sarcasm, but found none. "I don't usually explain myself," he went on, But you looked like someone who deserved more than what I gave." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope, holding it out between them. Maya stared at it, heat rising in her chest. She shook her head quickly. "No, that's not necessary. You don't have to—" "I know I don't," he interrupted gently, "but I want to." The words hung there, steady and deliberate, like he was giving her the choice. Around them, people hurried down the sidewalk, the city alive with its usual rhythm, yet for Maya it all seemed to fade into the background. Her fingers hesitated before reaching for the envelope. She wasn't sure why she took it, curiosity, pride, or the simple need to believe that not everyone overlooked people like her. When their hands brushed for the briefest second, she noticed the weight of his gaze. Not entitled, not dismissive, just present. "Thank you," she said quietly, almost against her own instinct. He nodded once, as if satisfied, and stepped back. "Maybe someday you'll understand why I gave it to you." Before she could reply, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving Maya standing there with the envelope pressed tight against her chest, her mind racing with questions she couldn't yet answer. Back in her apartment that evening, Maya sat at the small kitchen table, the envelope untouched beside her. The hum of the old refrigerator filled the silence while Matteo worked on a puzzle in the living room. She should have opened it hours ago, but her hands refused to move. When she finally slid a finger under the flap and pulled it open, her breath caught. Inside was not just cash. Though there were crisp bills neatly folded, it was also a handwritten note. Her eyes scanned the short message, written in careful script. "This isn't about the service. It's about you. People like you should never feel unseen." Maya stared at the words until they blurred. She wasn't used to kindness arriving like this, without strings attached, without someone expecting something in return. For years, every dollar she earned was tied to exhaustion, to bending her back, to plastering on a smile no matter how tired she felt. She closed her eyes, her mind wrestling with questions. Who was this man? Why did he notice her of all people? And what did he mean by "someday you'll understand"? Matteo's voice broke her thoughts. "Maya, are you okay?" he asked, peeking over the back of the couch. She quickly wiped at her eyes, tucking the note back inside. "Yeah," she lied softly, forcing a small smile. "Just tired." But later that night, lying awake in the narrow bed she shared with her worries, Maya turned the envelope over and over in her hands. She had no reason to trust a stranger, yet something about his words, the weight of them, kept echoing in her chest. For the first time in a long while, the thought crept in uninvited. Maybe tomorrow could hold something different. The next evening, Maya walked into the Gilded Sparrow with the envelope tucked safely in her bag. She had promised herself she wouldn't expect anything. No more notes, no more strange generosity. Just another night of balancing trays and pretending the world wasn't as heavy as it was. But when she reached her section, she froze. At the corner table sat the same man from the night before. This time he wasn't alone. Two sharply dressed associates leaned toward him, discussing something over a tablet. Yet the man's eyes lifted, catching hers, and he gave a slight nod, as if they shared a secret no one else in the room could see. The shift passed in a blur. Maya kept her distance, focusing on her other tables, but her pulse quickened each time she felt his gaze. When he finally left, there was no envelope waiting, no note. Just a receipt signed with a name she didn't recognize. Confused, she slipped it into her apron. Hours later, at home, she unfolded it again under the dim kitchen light. The name was clear now, Alexander Pierce. Matteo, sitting across the table with his homework, looked up. "Why do you keep staring at that paper?" Maya hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because I think someone noticed me when I thought I was invisible." She searched the name online that night, her old laptop buzzing to life. The articles stunned her. He wasn't just wealthy, he was one of the most influential investors in New York, known for backing people who came from nothing. For a long time, she just sat there, staring at the screen. Part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Another part felt a tremor of fear. But underneath it all, a quiet strength stirred. The sense that her life wasn't stuck in one place forever. Maya closed the laptop and whispered to herself, "Whatever this is, I'll be ready." In that moment, she didn't know whether Alexander Pierce would appear again, or if his gesture was just a passing kindness. What mattered was different. For the first time in years, she felt seen. And in that recognition, she discovered something she had almost forgotten. Her dignity was intact, and her story wasn't over yet. Lesson. Sometimes dignity is worth more than money. True kindness isn't about the size of a tip, but about seeing someone's humanity and reminding them they still matter. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. I'm truly grateful for your time. If you found meaning here, please give the video a like and subscribe to Rain Inside for more heartfelt stories. I look forward to seeing you again in the next one.